for he only yielded to duress, and all this even as Mirabeau made his supreme effort to save those who were fixed upon destroying themselves. Mirabeau sought the king and offered his services. The court sneered at him as a dupe. The queen wrote, "We make use of Mirabeau, but we do not take him seriously." When Mirabeau awoke to his predicament, he broke out in mixed wrath and scorn. "Of what are these people thinking? Do they not see the abyss yawning at their feet? Both the king and queen will perish, and you will live to see the rabble spurn their corpses." The king and queen, the nobility and clergy, could not see the abyss which Mirabeau saw, any more than the lawyers could see it, because of the temper of their minds. In the eye of caste, Europe was not primarily divided into nations to whom allegiance was due, but into superimposed orders. He who betrayed his order committed the unpardonable crime. Death were better than that. But to the true aristocrat it was inconceivable that serfs could ever vanquish nobles in battle. Battle must be the final test, and the whole aristocracy of Europe was certain, Frenchmen knew, to succor the French aristocracy in distress. So in the winter of 1790 the French fugitives congregated at Coblentz on the German frontier, persuaded that they were performing a patriotic duty in organizing an invasion of their country, even should their onset be fatal to their relatives and to their king. And Louis doubted not that he also did his duty as a trustee of a divine commission when he in 1 month swore before the Assembly to maintain the constitution tendered him, and in the next authorized his brother, the Comte d'Artois, to make the best combination he could among his brother sovereigns for the gathering of an army to assert his divine prerogative. On June 21st, 1791, Louis fled with his whole family to join the army of Beaulieu, with intent to destroy the entire race of traitors from Mirabeau and Lafayette down to the peasants. He managed so ill that he was arrested at Varennes and brought back whence he came, but he lied and plotted still. 2 years had elapsed between the meeting of the States General and the flight to Varennes, and in that interval nature had been busy in selecting her new favored class. Economists have estimated that the Church owned 1/3 of the land of Europe during the Middle Ages. However this may have been, she certainly held a very large part of France. On April 16, 1790, the Assembly declared this territory to be national property, and proceeded to sell it to the peasantry by means of the paper assignats which were issued for the purpose, and were supposed to be secured upon the land. The sales were generally made in little lots, as the sales were made of the public domain in Rome under the Licinian laws, and with an identical effect. The Emperor of Germany and the King of Prussia met at Pilnitz in August 1791 to consider the conquest of France, and on the eve of that meeting the Assembly received a report which stated that these lands to the value of 1,000,000,000 francs had already been distributed, and that sales were going on. It was from this breed of liberated husbandmen that France drew the soldiers who fought her battles and won her victories for the next 25 years. Assuming that the type of the small French landholder, both rural and urban, had been pretty well developed by the autumn of 1791, the crisis came rapidly, for the confiscations which created this new energy roused to frenzy perhaps the most formidable energy which opposed it. The Church had not only been robbed of her property, but had been wounded in her tenderest part. By a decree of June 12, 1790, the Assembly transferred the allegiance of the French clergy from the Pope to the State, and the priesthood everywhere vowed revenge. In May, 1791, the Marquis de la Rouërie, it is true, journeyed from his home in Brittany to Germany to obtain the recognition of the royal princess for the insurrection which he contemplated in La Vendée, but the insurrection when it occurred was not due so much to him or his kind as to the influence of the non-juring priests upon the peasant women of the West. The mental condition of the French emigrants at Coblentz during the summer of 1791 is nothing short of a psychological marvel. They regarded the Revolution as a jest and the flight to the Rhine as a picnic. These beggared aristocrats, male and female, would throw their money away by day among the wandering natives, and gamble among themselves at night. If they ever thought of the future, it was only as the patricians in Pompey's camp thought, who had no time to prepare for a campaign against Caesar, because they were absorbed in distributing offices among themselves, or in inventing torments to inflict on the rebels. Their chief anxiety was lest the resistance should be too feeble to permit them to glut themselves with blood. The creatures of caste, the emigrants could not conceive of man as a variable animal, or of the birth of a race of warriors under their eyes. To them human nature remained constant. Such, they believed, was the immutable will of God. So it came to pass that, as the Revolution took its shape, a vast combination among the antique species came semi-automatically into existence, pledged to envelop and strangle the rising type of man, a combination, however, which only attained to maturity in 1793, after the execution of King Leopold II, Emperor of Germany, had hitherto been the chief restraining influence, both at Pilens and at Paris, through his correspondence with his sister, Marie Antoinette, but Leopold died on March 1, 1792, and was succeeded by Francis II, a fervid reactionist and an obedient son of the Church. Then caste fused throughout Germany, and Prussia and Austria prepared for war. Rouërie had returned to Brittany, and only awaited the first decisive foreign success to stab the Revolution in the back. England also was ripening, and the instinct of caste, incarnated in George III, found its expression through Edmund Burke. In 1790 Burke published his Reflections, and on May 6, 1791, in a passionate outbreak in the House of Commons, he renounced his friendship with Fox as a traitor to his order and his God. Men of Burke's temperament appreciated intuitively that there could be no peace between the rising civilization and the old. One of the two must destroy the other, and very few of them conceived it to be possible that the enfranchised French peasantry and the small bourgeoisie could endure the shock of all that, in their eyes, was intelligent, sacred, and martial in the world. Indeed, aristocracy had perhaps some justification for arrogance, since the revolt in France fell to its lowest depth of impotence between the meeting at Pilnitz in August 1791 and the reorganization of the Committee of Public Safety in July 1793. Until August 1792 the executive authority remained with the king, but the court of Louis was the focus of resistance to the Revolution, and even though a quasi-prisoner, the king was still strong. Monarchy had a firm hold on liberal nobles like Mirabeau and Lafayette, on adventurers like Dumouriez, and even on lawyers like Danton, who shrank from excessive cruelty. Had the pure royalists been capable of enough intellectual flexibility to keep faith upon any reasonable basis of compromise, even as late as 1792, the Revolution might have been benign. In June 1792 Lafayette, who commanded the Army of the North, came to Paris and not only ventured to lecture the Assembly on its duty, but offered to take Louis to his army, who would protect him against the Jacobins. The court laughed at Lafayette as a Don Quixote and betrayed his plans to the enemy. "I had rather perish," said the Queen, "than be saved by M. de Lafayette and his constitutional friends." And in this she only expressed the conviction which the caste to which she belonged held of their duty. Cazalès protested to the Assembly, "Though the king perish, let us save the kingdom." The Archduchess Christina wrote to her sister Marie Antoinette, "What though he be slain if we shall triumph?" And Condé, in December 1790, swore that he would march on Lyons, come what might, to the king. France was permeated with archaic thought, which disorganized the emerging society until it seemingly had no cohesion. To the French emigrant on the Rhine, that society appeared like a vile phantom which had but to be exorcised to vanish. And the exorcism to which he had recourse was threats of vengeance, threats which before had terrified because they had behind them a force which made them good. Torture had been an integral part of the old law. The peasant expected it were he insubordinate. Death alone was held to be too little to inspire respect for caste. Some frightful spectacle was usually provided to magnify authority. Thus Bouillé broke on the wheel while the men were yet alive, every one in the bodies of his soldiers when they disobeyed him, and for scratching Louis XV with a knife, Damiens, after indescribable agonies, was torn asunder by horses in Paris before an immense multitude. The French emigrants believed that they had only to threaten with a similar fate men like